I hope you had a nice summer break. So for us, it was quite busy, dominated primarily by our conference in June. If unfortunately you missed it, we had over 90 speakers from around the world, but you can see the recordings of the main events, at least on our YouTube page. And if this is your first time joining us, the Measuring Progress seminar series, so I'm Kelsey O'Connor, I'm one of the organizers, and we also have Chiara Peroni and Francesco Saracino, our other organizers online as well. And today we are pleased to have Graciela Tonon speak about key actors in public policy making for quality of life. So Graciela will speak for approximately 30 minutes and then address questions at the end, at which time please post your questions in the chat. And during the presentation, please keep your microphones muted. And a last reminder, we are recording, and you'll be able to find this recording as well as others on our website and on our YouTube channel. Now to introduce Graciela. So Professor Graciela is a full professor and director of the Research Center in Social Sciences at the Universidad de Palermo, Argentina. She's also a full professor and director at UNICOM, the Social Studies Institute at the Universidad Nacional de Lomas de Zamora, Argentina. Graciela is editor of the Springer series of the International Handbooks of Quality of Life. She's vice president of publications of the International Society for Quality of Life Studies. She's secretary at the Human Development and Capability Association and author of 27 books, 93 chapters, and 62 scientific articles in English and Spanish. I hope to one day get even close to this number. So very great to have you here, Graciela. I'm very much looking forward to hearing more about this new book. And without further ado, we are pleased to welcome you, Professor Graciela Tonon. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kelsey. Thank you very much, Francesco, for this invitation and all the people that are with us today. Well, I will share my presentation that is not the whole book because it's impossible to do this in half an hour, but for me, the main topics that I think it can be in the interest for you. Yes? Okay. Well, the name of the book is Key Actor in Public Policy Making for Quality of Life. I first will introduce the theoretical concept, and at the end I will show you the particularities of the book. Well, my first idea is that transferring the results of quality of life research to the field of policymaking is a proposal that would facilitate decision-making and at the same time improve the population's quality of life. This is the idea. In this scenario, the role of the actors involved in this process becomes particularly important. The purpose of my book is to analyze and discuss the role of the actors in this process, researchers, policymakers, and also citizens, taking part in this process, and as well as the relationship between them, and to identify the strengths and at the same time the difficulties of the process, offering a proposal trying to bridge the gap. Well, it's important, first of all, to review the genealogy of the concept of quality of life, coming to the idea of considering that it is a multidimensional concept that comprises a number of dimensions that people evaluate differently according to the importance they attach to each dimension of their lives. Also recognize that quality of life is conditioned by the social structure in terms, for instance, of demographic characteristics, cultural traits, psychosocial characteristics of the community, and also the institutions in the community and the public policies. Quality of life offers us the possibility of a new theoretical outlook, which aims at working on potentialities rather than deficiencies, and on a community anchorage which includes the analysis of the socio-political context, where a person is considered as subject and also as protagonists. And when they may state that quality of life poses a social and political reality necessarily based on an integrated respect for human rights. Well, let's speak first about the traditional concept of public policies that was defined as the response government gives to the problems as they arise. But this conception of public policy has seen an evolution in the past few years. From this traditional perspective, according to which decisions flow the top downwards, to the inclusion of the influence of other actors different from the government in the definition of problems and the formulation of alternatives to resolve these problems. Public policy is a concatenation of intentional and coherent decisions or actions adopted by different actors, both public and occasionally private, with varying resources, institutional links, and interests in order to provide a specific solution to a problem politically defined as collective. But we need to remember that the polity is not independent from the place and circumstances in which it is implemented. So, and such is, it is also contingent on the characteristic of a historical time in which it is implemented. Policies are contingent responses, and what might work, for instance, in one country at a given time, perhaps might not be effective in another country at a different time. It is worth mentioning that government's responsibilities to the population needs usually depends on the pressure exerted on them. It is here where political rights afford individuals the opportunity to bring attention to their needs and demand the implementation of measures. Well, in this case, I will remember the idea of Amartya Sen, Nobel Prize 1998. He said that this is the instrumental part of democracy. The coordination and coherence of a policy implies that the different actors in the policy-making process must coordinate their actions, as the lack of coordination would be reflective of the uncooperative nature of political interactions. So the orientation of a policy toward public interest refers to the extent to which policies promote general quality of life in terms of public goods and do not tend to channel private benefits for only certain groups. So we will speak about the change in the policy cycle. We will go for an external activity provided by the state, that is a traditional view, to a focus on human rights, characterized by an attempt to construct a reflective capacity oriented to the development of a type of citizenship that involves not only political state recognition, but also socio-cultural recognition. So public policies depend on agreements and consensus at the level of the institutions or agencies involved. Decisions about the public policies are often limited by dissent, political confrontations, or even corruption actions. Public policies often hit some interest. Public or private actors could be damaged or perhaps displaced from business. Other times, they don't find the necessary balance between needs and resources. So, better policies are more likely to be implemented if the actors cooperate with each other and sustain their cooperations and interactions over time. But we have a question. Can researchers and policymakers collaborate to solve this problem? It is possible. Well, let's speak first about what happens with the university research. Well, the university research often is not very suitable for use by policymakers. Some people say this. It often takes much longer to produce results than a policymaker with a short deadline can tolerate. It is frequently highly critical, without positive suggestions for action. And it often avoids simple recommendations that can be acted upon and instead analyzes the advantage of various alternatives. Let's speak too about the methods and techniques we use in our universities. Well, first, it's important to clarify that although a large amount of quantitative data and statistical analysis produce reliable evidence for policymaking, we are sure about it. But there are other methods too that can provide some important social information, not only the statistics. Speaking about the statistics, the search for adequate statistics and best practice to address specific social problems goes hand in hand with the vision of the social sciences that can provide answers. So it is therefore necessary to highlight the political nature of knowledge, and by extension, the political nature of collecting and presenting the evidence. For example, if we see person as the real protagonist of the processes, then we must not only use quantitative indicators, which inform us to the observable realities translated into figures. This is very important. But we will also need to rely perhaps on a qualitative approach, which can inform us of individual opinions, perceptions, emotions, with due respect for their cultural particularities. But what are the ways in which policymakers use the research? Well, we can identify different possibilities. Policymakers can use research as data, or perhaps they can use it as ideas, or sometimes they can use it as argumentation. Let's see each of these cases. In the case of data, well, this model is more mechanistic in terms of its application to the problem at hand. It assumes that the data or set of findings obtained meets the user needs and that there is no conflict in terms of what solution or goal is wanted or required in order to resolve the problem. In the case of ideas, this model is perceived to be more general in nature and is used in situations when problems are seen as being complex in nature, when uncertainty is high and ideas are in demand. And finally, in the case of argumentation, this model is used when a decision has already been made and policymakers and/or interest groups draw on research to take an advocacy position. So, a close look at the policy decision-making arena reveals that when making a decision, policymakers often refer to research results in order to sustain or justify or legitimize such decision. The question then arises as to whether policymakers use research results because they actually find them useful, or perhaps because it is a way of avoiding responsibility in the event the relevant decision fails. Yes? Sometimes we see this kind of situations. Yes? I remember some moments of the pandemic in relation with this. Another common feature of the policy circuit is that the policymakers tend to consult and engage with researchers they already know, either because they belong to the same political party or perhaps share political ideas in common, or because they know them for personal reasons, for instance. Well, when this happens, likewise, policymakers sometimes do not listen or engage with researchers that lack the above mentioned characteristic. Yes, they don't look for people that think in another way, but perhaps their work is very, very important for them. Other situation we need to consider is the communication of the research results. That's another thing, very important thing. Because one of the biggest impacts of research in policymaker is the communication. As researchers often communicate in ways that are too long, perhaps, and too complicated for policymakers to understand. So much more should be done, not only to focus on the quality of how research is presented, but at the same time, on the quality of the research. Okay. So we need to recognize that researchers and policymakers have different things we must consider, different goals. They need different information and they have different languages. These three things we need to take care of them. To bridge the gap in communication between researchers and policymakers so requires two things for me, the dialogue and the writing. So let's see what happens when these two concepts, dialogue and writing. First, we reflect on the dialogue. And to speak about the dialogue, I will remember an important pedagogist of Latin America, Brazilian, Paulo Freire. Perhaps some of you knows about him. Freire said that the dialogue is an existential encounter that cannot be reduced to a simple act of one person's depositing ideas in another, or end in a mere polemical argument in which one of them attempts to impose on the other, as neither of these situations would help to transform the situation. The dialogue requires humility, said Freire. Thus, self-sufficiency is inconsistent with dialogue. Also, the dialogue requires critical thinking that perceives reality as an ever-changing process rather than only as an static entity. Hence, it is important for both researchers and policymakers to be aware of the structural conditions in which thought and language are dialectically constituted in order to communicate more fluently. Well, the continuous dialogue between actors has tended to ensure sustainability in the achievement of results. And in this sense, public deliberation is considered as an essential element of the public policy process. Let's speak a little about the writing. To speak about writing, we need first to remember some things. Let's see. The way in which research results are communicated to policymakers, first of all. The need to use a research format that is brief and accessible to policymakers. The situation that the research would be more helpful and useful if it included policy recommendations or implication, for instance, at the end. And it is necessary to avoid the overwhelming amount of information provided in a format that is not easily accessed by policymakers, particularly considering the tight timeframes policymakers have to take their decisions. So let's see some little and concrete recommendations. First of all, write a brief, clear, and precise document. Use simple language so all the persons, for example, in a meeting can understand. Use this kind of maps and graphics and tables and infographic and charts. All these kind of things that the people can see quickly and impact when they see the figure. And for researchers, my ideas like a step by step. First of all, produce a document that provides responses to the needs of the current social, political, economic context, rather than focusing on issues that call perhaps our attention as researchers in terms of intellectual challenge that are extraordinary, but perhaps this is not the case. Use precise, plain language for theoretical conceptualizations. If you need to include a specific concept, for example, please provide this definition for policymakers. Don't think they know what the definition of this concept previously. Insofar as possible, use maps, tables, graphic, infographic, charts to make the document contents more reader-friendly and illustrative. Write a brief, clear, and precise document. Avoid using non-conclusive data, which may be included in separate appendixes. Write the document in such a way that it makes it easy for policymakers to come to the decision. And very important, write the document with humility, keeping your target audience in mind. So thinking the person that will read the document, not only in myself, yes. Well, this is the book, yes. The name of the book, the title is Key Actors in Public Policy Making for Quality of Life, Facilitators and Obstacles. The book is published in a very important series that is entitled Human Wellbeing Research and Policy Making, founded by Dr. Richard Estes and Dr. Joe Sirchi, that are the series editors. And the most important thing for me, they are two of my teachers. So I really thank very much for the two of them to give me this opportunity. I'm published by Springer. So for the last part of this presentation, only take a quickly tour page by page of the book. Let's see. The book contains 8 chapters. The first one is in relation with the presentation. The second one speak about the concept of quality of life and public policy, the genealogy of the concept, and the current situation of this concept, how the concepts are used today. The chapter 3 is in relation with the production of quality of life knowledge, the cycle of the quality of life knowledge. Chapter 4 and chapter 5 are in relation with the people, the actors, researchers and policy makers, and citizens, and the process of citizens' participation. Chapter 6 is related with different types of say in relation with quality of life. And chapter 7 is the proposal to use research results in the field of policy making. And finally, I write a little chapter about conclusions. Well, to write this book, I speak with 21 international experts, and the first thing to say is thank you very much for all of them. In some cases, it's an interview. In some other cases, we exchange mails. In other cases, they send me the summary of some cases that are introduced in the book. But, well, I know that some of them are with us. Paul Anand, Daniel Sheck, Franco Lavolpe, Francesco Saracino, Irma Love, but perhaps there are more that I not see at the beginning. Thank you very much, too. I will mention you later. Well, some of them are researchers, some of them are members of international organizations, another ones are members of NGO teams, of government teams, professors, members of religious organizations, and private consultants. And what it was very important for me is to ask for people that are experts, but at the same time, are people from different parts of the world. Well, this is the challenge of the book. So thank you very much to the colleagues from Japan, South Africa, Germany, Luxembourg, the United States of America, Hong Kong, Peru, the United Kingdom, Mexico, Australia, the Philippines, and Argentina. Thank you very much for all. I can't write this book if you don't give me the opportunity to speak with all of us. Okay, in trying to close the presentations, I want to tell you, please remember that for connecting research and policy making, this process is a two-pronged progress. First of all, encouraging policymakers to become more research-minded, but at the same time, encouraging researchers to become more policy-minded. Yes, trying to bridge the gap between the two. Because the best policies are those that are implemented by actors that cooperate with each other and that sustain their actions over the time. So thank you very much. And I am the director of the Research Center in Social Sciences of Universidad de Palermo, Argentina. I put these my two emails in case you want to ask me something later. Of course, with pleasure, I will answer your question. And now we will have a time for the questions.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Graciela. I'd like to just start off as a reminder for everyone, please put your question in the chat box, and then we will read them off for Graciela, or Graciela will read them herself. And just to get us started, Graciela, I was thinking maybe if you could just tell us a little bit about your sense of engagement between researchers and policymakers over time. Do you think that there's been a significant change? And one thing I'm thinking about is right now we have this movement towards kind of populism. It feels like very much more emotionally driven policy as opposed to research. And so maybe if you can just comment on what's happened over time and maybe where you think we're going.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's interesting that I tell all of you that why I arrived to this book and to these ideas, perhaps, but because this is in relation with reality, but with my own history. First of all, I am a social worker. So during the first 25 years of my professional life, since the 20 to the 40 to the 45, I work as social workers. At the same time, I work at the university as professor and researcher. So I am all the time in the streets with the people, with the poor people, particularly with children and young people. And then I decided to study my mastery and my PhD in political sciences, trying to resolve the problems, because I can understand deeply why we can't resolve the problems. When I did all these studies, I understand what is happening, but I noticed that it's more complicated, and some of the problems are what happened with the people that take the decisions. So not only because of the structures, no, in an abstract way, but for people with name. And well, at this moment of my life and during the pandemic, and thanks the opportunity that gave me Richard and Joe, I tried to reflect on my journey, yes, until the moment, and trying to join all the experiences and trying to tell that it is possible to bridge the gap. It is not easy, but it is possible, and particularly at this moment of the humanity history after the pandemic, Because if we still remain in our position and don't try to join the other, we don't begin to speak with the others, we can't resolve the problem. So this is the idea for what I take Freire to, and to this kind of book that is a book that speak about public policies and quality of life. What I take a pedagogy man, well, because he's always speaking about the importance of the dialogue. At this moment, fortunately, public policies begins little by little to step by step to consider the emotions of the people, what the people's opinion on all these kind of things, what I celebrate. But I think we have a way in the future, very large, complicated, to resolve the problem. But I have the faith that this is possible. Yes, perhaps 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, I think that is impossible. Yes, or in terms of reality. But the things happen so much in the world that I think that today the policymakers can't work if they don't consider what happened with the people, and it's the same for the researchers. The researchers can't remain in the university inside. They need to be in touch with the people and try to know what is happening with the people.
Okay, thank you. I would like to just say 2 things real quick. So for everyone, there's a message in the chat from Marie Bergulia. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. They launched a call for chapters, which tries to bring together researchers and policymakers, actually. So take a look at the link here when you're ready, everyone. And then we had a question from Francesco.
Okay, Francesco. But I can't see the question of Francesco. Where it is? I don't know.
So it's in the chat. I can read it out.
Okay.
But if you'd like to read it yourself,
So more the
read
people
along.
can know.
Yeah. So his question was, how can the field of quality of life facilitate the dialogue between policymakers and researchers? Any key aspects you would like to emphasize?
Well, we spoke together about it, and Francesco say a lot of things to me about this. So thank you for this. First of all, one thing that, uh, well, you will tell me if it's the same like in my reality, but I think I close to this. People first connect themselves as persons in some way. So if we can begin to speak with each other, yes, and the two parts consider what are the real necessities of the other part, and not trying to impose one to other what is trying to do. If we can work in this part of the relation, in this little space, we can begin to have a possibility to resolve the problem. But if each of us remain in the previous position, trying to impose what I think, it is not possible. We will continue without resolving the problem. So for me, in the book, you can see, especially in chapter 7, more recommendations in terms of reflections, Francesco, perhaps. Then you will read all the book. I will send it. But now the book is print, but we have the digital copy for the people, especially that have participated in this project. But for me, it was one of the projects of my life. Yeah, not only a book. It's not one more book. It's especially for me. Yes, Joe know about it, and thank you again, Joe, to be there as always. Yes, but I think that the key are the person. My change is not. Well, I recognize the importance of the institutions, but every day I see more than the situations is persons more than the institutions. Because if we only consider the institution, we don't give a place to the person, I think we can't resolve the problems. I know that work with people is more difficult. I know this because I am first a social worker. Yes, I know. But I think that this is the key.
Graciela, we have a question from Joe.
Okay.
I don't know if you'd like to read it out yourself or if you'd like me to. I'll go ahead then.
Go ahead, Kelsey.
Yeah.
Yes.
So thank you, Graciela, for a wonderful and informative presentation. I believe that one important facet of the discussion is the bridge between researchers and public policy officials. The media has a very important role in creating this bridge.
Yes.
My question
Yes.
to you is, how do quality of life researchers connect with the media to disseminate important quality of life research that can impress policy officials? What are your thoughts?
Okay, Joe, this will be another book. Because no, I will tell you something very particular. I consider to include in the book the media. Yes, I do it. But at the same time, if really, it's another world, And one of one of the person I interview is a journalist that is here, Franco Lavolpe. So I speak with him about this, but I decided not to include the media because I think that I need more time to understand really what happened with the media, not only to study in the books or in the articles, trying to have more time with them, trying to understand what are the real perceptions and opinions of them, not only the things that they do. Yes, I am not if I am clear. The things that they feel. What are the problems that really? What are the other part of the problem that we can see? Because sometimes we are very, we not feel well with some things of the media, and sometimes yes, no. So I think that is another world to discover and complete the book, of course. In the book, I only mentioned this, but I say that I will not um, discuss about it in this book because it's not possible to do all the things. But in my horizon is to work particularly for the people of the media, but like a challenge for me trying to understand what things really happen to them. Yes, and in relation with this, why the media? Because I think that are similar, Joe and Kelsey. When I say recently that perhaps the policymakers, when they need a researcher, look for someone when they previously know because of in relation with his life or his political ideas. With the media, it's the same, happens the same. Yes, I noticed this. I see in some programs that they are speaking at the TV or the internet about a problem, and I recognize that the person perhaps is not the expert, but it's something that have a relation with this journalist, for example, no? Something like this. So I need to really make a research about this, but first trying to understand what is happening, really. I need more time, Joe and Kelsey. Please give me 1 or 2 years, and I promise I will do it.
You might collaborate with the journalist as well.
Yes.
But so here's a question from Francesco that's related. So he sees that there are two different difficulties limiting the ability of researchers to speak to policymakers or to speak their language. That is that they're not trained for it. As you mentioned, there's a different way of writing that needs to be learned. And two, the incentives aren't there necessarily. So, as an academic who's in a publisher parish environment, investing in other forms of writing can be seen as having limited value or a sunk cost. So perhaps quality of life research could shed some light on new research practices to evaluate academic research.
Yes, I agree. But two things. First of all, why quality of life? Because I think that quality of life consider the two dimension, the objective dimension, perhaps the condition of life, not, but at the same time the emotional dimension, and I include the social and political. With social, I consider economic, culture, social, the big social, no sociology only. No, it's not this my point of view. But first, we need to understand this idea, and if we work from this idea, considering this idea, then we can write something that in the case of the researchers, not that policymaker can understand. Because I noticed that the problem is sometimes we are so clear when we are speaking with colleagues, but when we try to transmit this to the policymakers don't understand. But so first of all, I think we must look inside us and say what we are doing that perhaps no is. I don't say that is wrong, but it's not correct for this situation when I need to speak with these people. I need to present the result in other way when I need to do something that at the moment I'm not recognizing what it is. Yes, trying to not to. I am very preoccupied of this position so rigid sometimes they are at the university. Yes, this is my preoccupation. It's the same with the policymakers, but I think that in the case of the university, sometimes, and consider all the traditions of the university, it's very difficult to close the two positions. Yes, to try to begin perhaps with a little connection, but is growing up in this connection.
Good, thanks. So next question. Have you inspired?
I have one in the chat. I don't see if you can see it.
Yeah,
Someone say, okay.
Yeah, I was gonna. I'm gonna butcher the name. Masij Gorni is the next question. So this person is.
Okay.
Sorry for butchering the name.
Okay.
Have you inspired any collaboration between researchers and politicians at the national or city level in promoting people's quality of life? Let's call it happiness politics. I like that title. If so, what does this look like, or is it just a theoretical base for now?
Okay, if I have the possibility of some collaboration, in my case, particularly, in
have
my
you
case,
inspired it? Sorry, it's have you inspired it? And we can broaden the question and say, have you observed this, whether you inspired it or another has, and what has that looked like?
okay, if I see the examples I can see till the moment, no, I notice that it's difficult. In my personal case, I try to do it at the moment. I am trying to collaborate. It's difficult because the first obstacle I identify is the different languages. Perhaps we are speaking about the same thing, saying in different ways, we can finally understand what we are speaking about. Yes. So I think that first of all, we need to construct a common language or something like this. Put the name you want. But this is one obstacle. The other one is perhaps the position, the rigid position. But if we can go step by step, I think it is possible. And as I am seeing to this question, I will connect this with the question I can see at the moment at the screen, Kelsey. And what did you find surprising from this study, and what did you find that you did not expect? Well, first of all, there are some things that I expect and happened, yes, during the journey to write the book and with the conversation with the people. And there are some things that make me begin to think in another topics related. For example, the trying to recover the original cultures. That is something that I am not thinking when I begin to write the book. Perhaps this is something I surprised myself. Daniel speak about it. The other problems that I know, but I can see more clear in some part of the world. For in the case of the researcher, the necessity of the immersion scholars to try to know how to begin to work with policymakers. I discovered that this idea is bigger at this moment than it was at the moment that I was young, for instance. So I am discovering little things, yes, in particularly when I spoke with the experts, and not only the experts that have a lot of years of work and trajectory. I spoke at the same time with a few younger researchers trying to have the first opportunity to go in touch with policymakers. This is in the case of South Africa, for example, Savir Adams. I'm not sure if she's with us at the moment, but I learn a lot. I am always very open to listen to the young people that are the people that are beginning to project the future. No, so this is very important at this moment of my life. Try to listen to them. Yes.
So I just added a question. If you want, I can read it out. So really, I want to push back and challenge a little bit. So I appreciate the book, but just to continue the conversation. So I want to know, what are your concerns about, say, policymakers, going directly to the researchers, or researchers trying to go directly to the policymakers? So I have some, potential concerns, which is that, the results from our studies may not really apply. They may be based on a subpopulation. The take-up could be low when you try to expand or scale it. The results may not apply because of institutional, cultural, or timing. And what I really see as an issue is policymakers may also just cherry pick certain results and use to defend their previously held beliefs. So I'm, and I have a little bit of this view coming from before, that as an economist, we should first focus on, positive type results, a little bit more anormative, and leave the policy making to the policymakers. At the same time, I recognize what you're suggesting, that we could do a better job communicating. But I also see some limitations and want to hear what you're thinking.
Okay. Another thing that perhaps I need, or I want to ask you, is what do you think about the use of the two methods, no? The statistics and the qualitative, but if you think it is possible, because for me it's possible, but I don't know, most of you are persons that all the time are producing statistics, yes, and trying to measure. What do you think, if it is possible to show in the two methods, if they are quite different, or it is not possible, or perhaps it is complicated? What do you think about it? Because this is one of the things that I continue to think about. Sorry, Kelsey, that I am asking the public, but I think it's important for me.
Yeah. So, and Maria, I see you raise your hand, but when you lower it again, then I don't know if you want me to still call on you. So, yeah, if you keep it up. So, Graciela, to respond. So, to use both qualitative and quantitative, I think would only enrich our discussion, of course. The concern I have is that, let's say scholars, policymakers will just choose to use whatever they want to use. Maybe not in all instances. But frequently that may be the case. And, so an example is, if you are reporting your results in a brief, concise way, you may not be reporting the qualifications that go with it. That, these are results that apply on average. And then a policymaker may want to try to apply this and think that it's going to work. So they may be missing some of the important detail. I see potential solutions that are related to earlier parts of the discussion, which is about really communicating it better. So drawing upon the results from multiple studies, right? And so maybe there's somebody like the What Works Center for Wellbeing, for example, in the UK, which translates the results from research into usable information for policymakers. And frequently it's based on multiple sets of studies, multiple studies. So and they're specializing in this. So they're cultivating that language, that is different, as we've described. So maybe this is an example where there's still an intermediary. So maybe let me, if I rephrase my question, do you see the role of an intermediary or do you think policymakers and researchers really should, interact more in general?
Well, I think there are two different roles, really. Every of these roles has their particularities, but I think that they really, at the moment, they need it. So each other needs. So it is not possible that policymakers only decide, take the decisions or prepare the programs without having a conversation with the researchers. And I think that today researchers needs in some way to have what is happening, what the situations in daily life really, and need a contact with, perhaps only a contact, but some contact, some conversation with the people that are making the decisions. Because the world have a lot of problems, and if we stayed in a position without connecting with the others, I think that we will not resolve the problems. But it's not like a fighting without the two. So who knows more? No, it's not the situation. The situation is each of these groups know different things, and in their daily life needs different things and do different things. But they are all working, or I suppose they are all working to trying to improve the quality of life of the people. Yes, this is the thing that must join them. And this is a large trip, but it is important to begin to do the first steps and try to do the daily steps, step by step, with humility. And going in this situation of connect each others from the point of view that I can learn something from you, and at the same time you can learn something from me. For instance, if you are the policymaker and I'm the researcher of change the role, yes. But I think that today we can't resolve the problems alone. It is not possible. Take a look what happened with the pandemic. It is not possible. Perhaps in another. So I am a woman from the last century, I say, yes. So I see a different world, but today the world is like this, and we can't think that we cannot be cannot live without trying to resolve the problem and changing the situation.
So
And the little thing we can do every day and think is positive.
there's a very quotable sentence you had here. It could be a bumper sticker. We cannot solve the problems alone. But with that, we'll go to Marie, who's had her hand raised.
Thank you. Thanks.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Graciela, and especially for this question about what kind of research can interest policymakers. So I spent the first 15 years of my career as a policymaker. I worked in policy, and then I moved to academia. And most of the time in academia, I worked on collaborative projects with policymakers. So I feel I have a sense of what policymakers have an appetite for, what they have time for. And in my experience, it's not that kind of research which, as academics, we strive to publish in the top journals. When we're striving to publish, we're striving to make some nuanced contributions, something cutting edge, something very specific that adds to the whole mountain of literature. That's not what policymakers want. They want the bird's eye view on what the knowledge is out there and what other countries are doing and how they can quickly apply it to their context and that it will work, basically. And what that is neither quantitative nor qualitative research, really. What that is
No.
a review. It's as simple as that. They want a good literature review with actionable points and maybe some little application which will never make it to a cutting edge journal, some little application to test the water in their country if no, primary research has been done there. And with that said, I'm currently sort of heading this project in Malta to bring well-being research to well-being policy. And it struck me that there isn't this collation of a very simple, actionable points of what research has shown us works in well-being. And that's why, for the absence of it, we decided to put this book together, and which link I've shown you. Really, it's almost as though all the things you're saying, Graciela, somehow we're trying to address, create this forum for researchers and policymakers to talk to each other in simple terms.
Yes.
We've even said, chapters must only be 5,000 words long, nothing too technical. We really want an assembly of what's out there that policymakers can use and showcase to one another. So
Thank you, Marie. Thank you very much. Where are you from, Marie?
I'm from Malta.
Okay. But you know what difficult is to do the things simple.
Of course, of course, of
It's
course.
very difficult.
Simplicity is not simple.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, Paul, you raise your hand.
Well, I did briefly, and I see we're running out of time, so I won't take too long. But I do think the conversation you've had with Kelsey is really interesting here, and it strikes me that the way these things get done might vary quite a bit depending on the country context. I mean, there was a reference to the UK, What Works Centre. That's very interesting. It is, in some sense, systematic, of course, but it's still shaped by the individual preferences of the people who work in the What Works for Wellbeing Centre and the demand from policy makers. I guess other examples would be the OECD, which is a whole institution, if you like, that's designed for translating research into actionable ideas for policymakers, and has since for the past 10 years had a focus on better life, well-being, and incorporated that into the policy analyses in all of its areas. And so in that sense, and I think that's a little bit of an untold story, actually. It hasn't had the dramatic effect on the way in which academic economists work, that's true. But I think it has had an impact on the way in which policy economists work in national and international organizations. And you could say exactly the same thing about the UNDP, the Human Development Office and its Human Development Index. And then one other thing to mention, I suppose, is the introduction of people may have heard about the REF. This is a sort of an Olympic Games for researchers that we have in the UK. Happens every 6 years, not every 4 years, but we have this regular competition. And one of the things that's happened this time round is that universities have been paid 25% of their research income on the basis of their social impact. And that so has changed the incentives for the best academics and all the universities, all the academics who are interested in doing that are now engaging with that process. So I think I very much take those comments about the limits and the dangers. I think they're very well made, and I think there are the world is trying to work out different ways in which those issues can be addressed.
Well, thank you, Paul. Well, I know, Kelsey, we're on time.
Yeah, we are just over, and actually, I was going to see if Catherine Scrivens, who is with the OECD, unfortunately, she just dropped.
I see, but he's going away. Yes, she's going. But I see at the moment. Yes.
It looks like, and we've lost quite a few of the people. So I think, if it's okay with you, we'll just have one last question from Francesco.
No, as you want,
and then we'll cut it there.
For me, it's okay. For me, it's okay. No matter. And thank you very much for all the people that come. I know that the people can see this, no, because there is in a part of static. So the people, perhaps some people that can attend, can see it later. Yes. Thank you for this too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we post on our website and on our YouTube channel.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, all of you. Yes, and thank you for being part of my book, the person that I collaborated. Yes, thank you very much, and especially Joe for make this possible. Yes, thank you, and for Richard too.
Yeah.
So,
Did you want? So there was just that one last question. Did you want
okay,
to take
yes,
it? Yeah.
okay,
So
okay,
it's
no problem.
from Francesco. He's saying he'd like to pick your brain. So maybe outside the scope, but like to pick your brain on the following issue. So many governments show interest in measuring quality of life. Some try to introduce well-being in the decision-making process. Others nominated ministries for happiness or loneliness, for example, the UK and UAE. What would be an effective way to credibly integrate well-being in the realm of policymaking? Maybe it's a big question too.
Okay. But is there what I am looking? I don't know because I am, yes.
Yeah, this last question by Francesco. So,
Okay. I like to pick your brain on the for our medical. Okay, yes, but I consider well-being, Francesco. You are working from the point of view of well. I consider well-being. I consider quality of life, like was defined in this sense 4 decades ago, like a big umbrella, and in connection with well-being, with happiness, with satisfaction with life, all these kind of things, and even when in relation to with life conditions, that the objective, no, more related to welfare, yes, the things that people have. And so trying to join the objective with the subjective dimensions. Well-being for me is part. So trying to connect the well-being in the realm of policy making for me is without doubt. If I have no doubt about it. But at the same time, I know that perhaps for some of the people that take the decisions in the country, it's like an exotic thing. But for me, it's not possible. But please, I always say, remember that I am first a social worker. Yes, this is the situation. For me, it's impossible today to take a decision, a policy decision, if we not consider the well-being of people. Oh, perhaps only a little of this, like Marie told us, but something. I am not expecting that policymakers became experts in well-being. No, it's not. But only to consider that well-being exists, and it is important as an element to take the decision. Yes, this. I think today in the 21st century, it's not possible to left well-being outside this relation. Yes, of course. So if you continue doing this, I will support all your work.
very good, Graciela. So I think we can close there, and I'll just remind you of that quote. So we cannot solve problems alone. You said that today, Graciela, and I will remember that. Thanks everyone for showing and for sticking with us a little after the time. Thanks, Graciela, for a wonderful presentation. And we hope to see everyone again in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you, Joe.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.